Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council for our dinner with the President of the Philippines, who's just joined us. He's a busy man. He's come from a meeting with the President and the other heads of the ASEAN states in Palm Springs the last 2 days, and he has an event immediately after this, so we're a little bit cut in time, but we're glad that he could make time to join us. Philippines is a country where I spent considerable time when I was a reporter, where I always felt very welcome. So it's our pleasure tonight to return that warm welcome to all the other Filipino visitors and guests and to the President for joining us here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. Allow me also to recognize our chairman, Mr. Bob Van Dyne, and the other board members we have here, Mr. Bob Abernathy, Dan Eberhardt, and Andrew Tabacoli. You're very welcome. I'd also like to welcome representatives from the Consulate Generals of Kuwait, New Zealand, and South Africa. And allow me to welcome in particular the Ambassador of the Philippines to the United States, Jose Quizia, and his wife Victoria. You're very welcome. And I should mention that we're also joined by 7 cabinet secretaries from the government of the Philippines and a large group of high-ranking officials. You're all very welcome. We're delighted to see so many members of the Filipino Press Corps, whom I know from my time there have a particularly rambunctious reputation. Welcome and have at it. A special welcome to our public high schools, who our members so generously support to come here. We have a large number here tonight: Alhambra High School, California Academy of Math and Science, Cathedral High School, Culver City High School, John Marshall High School, La Cañada High School, Palisades Charter, Santa Monica High, University Prep Value High, and Vaughan Next Century Learning Center. You're all very welcome. The Philippines, along with Ireland, where I grew up, are 2 countries with extremely high approval ratings of Americans, as any of you who've been to either country will know. Polls generally show that about 95% of Filipinos tell pollsters they're favorably disposed to the United States, and as I've joked with Ambassador Quizia before, I have never met the other 5%. I don't know where they are. Benigno Aquino III became president of the Philippines in 2010, after serving in his country's House of Representatives and the Senate, and also after working in the private sector. His presidency has seen economic progress in the Philippines, crackdown on corruption, improvement in the education system. In 2014, the Philippines signed an enhanced defense agreement with the United States, allowing for U.S. troops to rotate through the Philippines for the first time since 1992, when Subic Bay Naval Base and Clark Air Base were closed. Not unconnected with that fact is another challenge that the President has faced in his presidency, which is a growing dispute with China, which has asserted its sovereignty over the Spratly Islands and other reefs in the South China Sea, has recently been submitted to the Court of Arbitration in The Hague, and we will be interested to see how that arbitration comes out. One outstanding campaign issue that the President has not yet solved during his time in Malacanang Palace is his smoking habit. Despite a campaign promise to give up, and despite a phone call from President Obama, who has his own experience there, with some tips, I believe that's still a work in progress. We wish you luck with that. The Aquino name is, of course, a familiar one in Philippine politics, familiar even here in the United States. The President's mother, of course, Corazon Aquino, was herself the 11th president from 1986 to 1992, following the ouster of President Ferdinand Marcos. The current president's father, Benigno Aquino Jr., was one of the principal opponents of Marcos, was arrested after martial law was declared in the Philippines in 1972 and spent 7 years in jail before he was finally allowed to leave to come to the United States for medical treatment. And he spent 3 years here, effectively in exile, before he decided to fly back to Manila to try and continue the struggle against Marcos in his home country. As so many of you know and will remember, he never even made it past the airport. In fact, when he stepped off the plane, he was assassinated on the tarmac of Manila Airport. A sad loss to the Philippines, but I dare say one of the precipitating factors for the subsequent fall of President Marcos. And so, with that in mind, I should mention, 2 years before he went, Benigno Aquino Jr. gave a speech right here to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council, where he would have talked about the values of freedom and equality that mean so much to us and that have fortunately been established in the Philippines as well. And so for that very special reason, it is my distinct honor to welcome tonight his son, the 15th President of the Philippines, Benigno Aquino III.
Thank you. Good evening. Mr. Robert Banding, Mr. Terry McCarthy, Mr. Robert Abernathy, and the distinguished members of the Board of Directors of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council, of course, our Ambassador, Joey Quisha. May I introduce members of the Cabinet accompanying me in this trip. Secretary of Finance, Cesar Purisima, Secretary of Defense, Voltaire Gasmin, Secretary Adrian Cristobal of the Department of Trade and Industry, Secretary Emmanuel Esguerra of our National Economic Development Authority, our Press Secretary, Secretary Arminio Coloma, the Head of the Presidential Management Staff, Secretary Julia Bad, the Cabinet Secretary Serena Almendras, and Secretary Manuel de Guzman of our Climate Change Commission, Consul General Leo Herrera Lim, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. In the early 1980s, my family lived in exile in Boston as a dictator by the name of Ferdinand Marcos lorded it over our home country. At the time, my father was a former senator of the Republic who was, as earlier said, imprisoned for 7 years and 7 months for opposing Mr. Marcos, before being finally allowed to come to the United States of America to receive, undergo a heart bypass operation for his heart condition. During our stay here, he took every opportunity to speak about the situation back home. In fact, I am told that one of his most prominent speeches was delivered here in this very city, where he talked of the many ways in which the dictator had been eroding our democracy and freedom. Less than 6 years after that speech, after my father was brutally assassinated upon his return to Manila, and after the Filipino people toppled the dictatorship in a peaceful revolution, it was my mother's turn to take center stage. As our nation's new president, she stood before the United States Congress to recount the Philippine story and to signal our nation's commitment to the restoration of the freedoms that the dictatorship had denied us. As an aside, perhaps I should say that my father once said, "Pity the person who follows Mr. Marcos. He will be expected to solve all of the problems created in practically no time." He never imagined it would be on my mother's shoulders to try and solve that conundrum. As you can see, my parents have bequeathed to me a solid legacy of speaking before communities in the United States. Today, I return to share how we are harvesting the fruits of sacrifice, that of my parents, but more so that of millions of Filipinos who stood for freedom in those dark days. Perhaps like any youthful democracy, the years after martial law were not free from missteps. My own ascent into office marked the end of a lost decade, during which my predecessor was besieged, amongst others, by allegations of corruption. True enough, just as Filipinos unseated the dictator in 1986, they flocked to the polling stations in 2010 to vote not for personality, but for the idea that defined our campaign. In Filipino, it's called "Kung walang korap, walang mahirap," which translates to "where there is no corruption, there will be no poverty." And over these past few years, it has likewise been their support that has allowed us to persevere in the face of entrenched interests and enact reform after reform. Allow me to give you a brief overview of what we have done to transform our nation. From day one, we identified and plugged leaks in every corner of the bureaucracy. We overhauled our budgeting process, pursuing zero-based budgeting. This requires government to review every single line item in the budget to see which ones are efficient and which ones have shown to be extremely inefficient or not even performing any function of the role and hence needed to be scrapped. We also now practice what we call bottom-up budgeting, through which we harness the wisdom of local communities through extensive consultations. We put our budget online, free to be reviewed and scrutinized by all, and we required our local government units to follow suit. The result has been a budgeting system that ensures every peso of taxpayer money contributes to the national good. Of course, these initiatives are only one part of the equation. Nurturing a government that works primarily for the people can only happen when there is a guarantee of justice. That public servants who place their own interests above that of the people will be held accountable. In this regard, our administration has spared no one. Now, my predecessor in the presidency is under hospital arrest facing charges of plunder. Senators, once deemed untouchable, are also facing cases after the alleged involvement in a scam of massive proportions. Perhaps I should explain that in our country, in our system, we only have sitting at any one time 24 senators who are elected nationwide. This is normally considered a stepping stone to the presidency. Our Congress has removed from office through impeachment a Chief Justice who, in his statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth, declared only 2% of his assets, thus violating the very constitution he swore to uphold. Beyond these high-profile targets, we have also filed 784 cases against smugglers, tax evaders, sorry, and erring revenue officials. It only follows that these initiatives, among others, have widened our fiscal space. We have capitalized on this opportunity by making major strategic investments in our greatest resource, namely the Filipino people. We expanded a program called the Conditional Cash Transfer Program. This program gives cash grants to poor households so long as they keep their children in school and have them vaccinated, amongst other conditions. From around 790,000 households in mid-2010 when we assumed office, the program now covers almost 4.4 million households and homeless families. And the target for this year is to have it reach the final goal of 4.6 million households. Of course, this complements our improvements in the education sector. By the end of 2013, we managed to completely erase our inherited backlogs in classrooms, school seats, and textbooks. We likewise passed a law that upgrades our education system to global standards, which gives our students more time to digest their lessons, amongst others. To ensure that our citizens remain productive and free from vulnerability due to disease, we undertook a massive expansion of the government healthcare program called PhilHealth. From an enrollment list that covered only 51% of the population in 2010, and that probably was a high figure because it was an election year, we now cover 91% of Filipinos, with our health officials hard at work to loop in the remainder of the population that so far has evaded being enrolled. And at that point in time, we will have achieved truly a universal health care coverage. After graduating from high school, our students have a menu of options that is more extensive than ever before. One reason for this is our investment in technical education. Over the course of our term, we have improved both the coverage and efficiency of our Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. From 2010 until 2015, more than 1 million graduates benefited from the Training for Work Scholarship Program. The average employment rate, which is defined, or placement rate, which is defined as finding a job 6 months after graduation, has shot up from 28.5% then among tested scholars in 2006 to 2008 to above 70% among the 2013 graduates, and even reaching 96% in several specific sectors where there was very good cooperation with industry. The program is so effective that I constantly hear stories of graduates earning an income that is multiples of my own, and with considerably less stress too, and which I intend to follow after I step down from office. I'm reminded of that condition. Well, many of these programs were designed with the long-term impact in mind. The early results really have been very encouraging. The numbers say it all. The preliminary result of the assessment conducted by our Department of Social Welfare and Development has revealed that roughly 7.7 million individuals, beneficiaries of the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, have risen above the poverty line over the years of our administration. We have achieved the lowest unemployment rate in a decade. We have experienced the fastest 6-year average economic growth since the 1970s. And I have to explain that figure a little. In the 70s, martial law was declared in our country in 1972, and the economic policy then in place was crony capitalism. So government guaranteed so many different projects. Obviously, the numbers will say there was tremendous economic growth, but since they were projects meant to line the pockets of those involved rather than really spur the economy on. What they have left us is a mountain of debt, from practically no foreign debt before martial law to a very, very high figure that up to now we are still paying for. So the comparison is not really apples to apples. Another thing, in fact, in 2013, the world, I think, has recognized our efforts, wherein the three major credit ratings agencies unanimously declared us as finally investment grade, a first in our history. And we have likewise climbed several measures of global competitiveness, most prominently that of the World Economic Forum, where we jumped from the 85th spot in 2010 to 47th in 2015. In just a few years' time, we have shed the title of Sick Man of Asia and have been referred to as Asia's bright spot, Asia's rising tiger, and Asia's new darling, amongst others. All this we have achieved through the initiative of our people, who have affirmed our collective belief in democratic principles. Our progress naturally has afforded us greater capacity to look outward and to take a closer look at our role in the global community. More and more, the Philippines sees itself in a better position to make a contribution. This is particularly important because the world, as we know it, is shrinking. Many of the problems we face transcend national borders. There is, for instance, the increasing risk posed by climate change, which challenges all of us. To review, among others, the many ways in which we generate energy. Worldwide pandemics continue to threaten not only sectors like tourism, but the safety of our people. Extremism continues to rear its ugly head even as refugees from conflict areas seek safety far from their homes. As for our region in Southeast Asia, we are also witnessing very aggressive actions by our big neighbor to our west and north, the world's second largest economy and a nuclear power at that. Let me make it clear. We have zero ambitions in terms of arming ourselves with our own weapons of mass destruction. We have no plans of trying to come up with some sort of deterrence against the military might of that superpower. In other words, in the classic argument of guns versus butter, we would rather spend our limited resources on the butter side of that equation. Yet, like all nations, we need to defend our rights. That is why we have accessed the channels available to us to try and resolve the issue in a manner that is both legal and peaceful, in the belief that in law, everybody is equal. My nation has resolved to accept whatever decision the arbitral tribunal makes, and we are hopeful that our neighbor, who has constantly reiterated the respect for international law, will in time do the same. I, along with my people, am hoping for a favorable outcome as regards arbitration. But I also feel the need to point out that it's far too dangerous to be caught up in traditional ideas of victory and defeat. In our modern world, it is becoming more and more evident that the only true victory is the preservation and enhancement of global harmony. Because while a shrinking world results in nations sharing problems, it also affords us the tools necessary to more actively work together in pursuit of our shared aspirations. I, for one, still believe that there is no problem that can withstand global solidarity. More than ever, nations must contribute everything they can to address communal challenges instead of entering into protracted debates over who should be doing what and by how much. For instance, if we ignore the problems in countries like Syria and Iraq, it is still our respective nations who must contend with the consequences in the form of millions of refugees fleeing violence and oppression in their own home countries. Likewise, apathy allows despair and radicalization to gain ground among the dispossessed, the consequences of which can only inevitably spill over to our own shores. I believe I can speak for most countries when I say that while I believe in extending the limits of our compassion, no single country, regardless of their wealth, can take care of all refugees for an unlimited period of time. It is in all our best interest to work for stability, not just in our nations, but in our regions. Thus, countries the world over must continue working to find commonalities and harmonize efforts to give rise to a world order that allows people to live with peace, dignity, and contentment in their own homes. Make no mistake, this will never be easy, nor will it happen overnight. There are countless legitimate issues that sometimes affect our capacity to deepen our relations with one another, but my optimism remains. Throughout my life, I've witnessed people united by purpose accomplish the impossible. And I believe that such miracles are not exclusive to the Philippines. If we of the global community can commit to taking every available step, no matter how small, to engender trust and enhance our linkages, then I believe that we can confront any issue, no matter how huge. We can nurture a healthier and more productive global diplomatic landscape, and perhaps little by little we can give rise to a world where no one is left behind. A world of peace and prosperity that is felt by all, a world that we can proudly bequeath to future generations. Thank you. Good evening.
So the President has time for a few questions, and we have a microphone there. If you put your hand up, Alexander will find you.
Thank you so much, President. The international law simply favors the Philippines in the tribunal, but it is widely expected that China is going to ignore or not respect that decision. In the event that China does, what is the options that you see are available for the Philippines?
Well, one thing that I think, one of the major benefits that we thought of in entering this particular mode of interaction was that perhaps we can settle one question, which is the nine-dash line a valid theory, a valid pronouncement under UNCLOS? Is it part and parcel of international law? And once there is addition that is made, then everybody's duties and obligations will be that much clearer. China, we'd like to think, is true to its word that it wants to abide by international law and wants to preserve good relations with the rest of the global community. And perhaps, given enough time and sensibilities to the Asian concept of losing face, perhaps we can get them to be more reasonable in their actions towards the smaller countries around the periphery of the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. Thank you.
I've read the Education for All report by UNESCO, and it's very obvious that the Philippines had really leapt a lot of bounds and had gotten a lot of success. What do you think could be the role of Filipinos abroad, like us, could help further the education in the Philippines?
Well, we'd like to think that, in my travels as president, we always make it a point to touch base with Filipino communities abroad. And universally, the host countries tell us that they have made such a positive contribution to various sectors in that particular society. It gives rise to the belief that given the right environment, the Filipinos tend to shine. So there are, shall we say, problems that perhaps other countries have solved ahead of the Philippines that our countrymen had a part in solving, and to which their experience can really benefit us from trying, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, to just applying the right principles in solving whatever problem that is. Of course, access to the latest technology, the latest bodies of knowledge, no? Given a broader field, would undoubtedly redound to more of this knowledge being passed on quicker to so much of our countrymen. So I guess the bottom line is all of this, all of our countrymen who are abroad have been gaining so much experience in so many different fields that sharing this now instead of later redounds to quicker attainment of the goals that we have all set for ourselves. Thank you.
Your Excellency, right here.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for coming. Pleasure to have you. I was wondering if you could comment, if you have any comments on China launching the surface-to-air missiles, the deployment from the Woody Islands in the South China Sea. If you had any comments on that?
I don't have any reports about the missiles. Sorry, I've been traveling for the past 2 days. We note that there have been military equipment supposed to have been put in place in several of the features in the South China Sea. There is I just want to make sure of my facts. In 2002, ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and China entered into an agreement called the Declaration of Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, normally referred to in the acronym, the DOC. And amongst the provisions, if I remember correctly, is Section 5, which states that all parties will refrain from actions that will aggravate tensions. I'm a bit paraphrasing, but that is the gist of the stipulation. Then and again agreed upon and entered into by all. Now, in 2002, they tried to come up with the code of conduct that would be binding on every party. They failed to do so, and in lieu of a code of conduct, there was a declaration of conduct statement of general principles with the promise of coming up with a code of conduct at some point in time. The Philippines, for its part, in 2012 in Phnom Penh, in a meeting with China by ASEAN, reminded everybody that that was the 10th year, and there was yet to have occurred any meeting with regards to the formulation of the code of conduct. So basically, again, as I stated earlier, we have tried to work with ASEAN, and we have had some progress in it, in asking China to adhere to that document that they entered willingly and freely with ASEAN in 2002. The second track is, of course, arbitration. And at the end of the day, we are hoping that, again, everybody's duties are made clear, everybody's obligations and entitlements are made clear, and we remove the atmosphere of condensing theories as to how each party should be behaving in this particular body of water, which is a very important body of water for the world. No? At least 40% of world commerce traverses this particular body of water. So this acts, the reclamation or turning into islands of features that to a large degree were just that, features, rocks that were submerged, etc., does not add to stability in the region. After having built these islands, putting in some people to say that later on they might have the right of self-determination as to whom do they want to belong. Flights into the area on these new islands. Of course, when you test, they called it test flights. Eventually, there will be a need to control the flights coming in and out. And who actually gave them, or any entity, the right to suddenly say that this particular airspace is suddenly ours? So we have been pushing this since, if I remember correctly, our very first incident. Well, my predecessors have been pressing this, but tensions have been heightened from, I think it was 2012, and then there was another incident, probably 11 or 12. I'll have to check my notes. I'll send it forward. But the first incident had to deal with a feature called the Reed Bank, which is 80 nautical miles from a province of the Philippines called Palawan. Therefore, clearly within the 200-mile exclusive economic zone as mandated by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The entity that was given the service contract was challenged and shooed away by agents of the People's Republic of China. It was a Coast Guard ship at that point in time. During the first attempted satellite launch by North Korea, portion of that delivery vehicle would fall under Philippine waters, and we sent the flagship of the Philippine Navy to monitor as to whether or not there would be danger once this particular stage of that rocket would fall on our waters and the eastern coast. It was traversing our western coast where it chanced upon Chinese fishermen in a feature called the Scarborough Shoal, which we call Bahado Masinloc, which is 120 nautical miles from the coastline of Masinloc, Zambales. Zambales is a province in central Luzon, the main island in the Philippines. And we are allowed to accost people who are fishing in our exclusive economic zones without permission. Again, as I understand it, based on UNCLOS, they were challenged by, again, agents of the People's Republic of China who interfered with our lawful arrest of these fishermen who actually had quite significant catches on at least 2 of the 8 vessels, to include endangered species that unfortunately both the Philippines and China had signed an agreement called the Convention on the International Trafficking of Endangered Species, or CITES. So we tried not to escalate the situation. We have not made a particular point of stating that, there seems to be a violation of UNCLOS, and there also seems to be a violation of CITES. We have kept our mouth quiet up to this point in time, primarily to try and come to a reasonable agreement. They have changed, shall we say, the rules of the road, and unilaterally at that. And so this traditional fishing ground of ours, some of our fishermen have alleged that in inclement weather, there is a natural shoal that is the safe harbor during inclement weather. At certain times, they were prevented from entering the shoal, which is, again, 120 miles from our shore, which is clearly within the 200-mile exclusive economic zone. So we cannot let the situation persist. Some have cautioned to be patient, or to be even more patient than job. And we're saying that in a situation where it is very fluid, there might be incidents that can be triggered by the lack of clarity as the rules that should govern our conduct. So we've been pushing for the code of conduct. We've gone the arbitral route, and we're hoping that reason comes to the forefront. We keep telling all parties, our country is interested, any government, no, our government is interested in improving the lot of our people. Now, prosperity cannot happen in instability. So we are asking cooperation in promoting stability as a necessary groundwork or as a necessary base for prosperity to happen for all our respective peoples. So we did point out as a last point, in 2011, Philippine companies had invested something to the tune of $2.5 billion in China's economy. China invested $600 million in the Philippine economy. They send us, at that point in time, about 200,000 tourists. And at that point in time, we sent them 800,000 tourists. So we said, you have a very good situation, no matter how you look at it. And they responded in 2011 by saying our disputes in this body of water should not be the be-all and end-all of our relationship. But unfortunately, when they stopped, for instance, their importation of our bananas, part of the reason was this dispute. And the only tension actually that does exist is primarily because of our differing views as to who is entitled to what in this particular troubled sea. Thank you.
My name is Jane-Marie Tabuada, and I'm a student at the California Academy of Mathematics and Science. Your Excellency, I would like to know which is most important to your administration, to expand the current infrastructure in the provinces of the Philippines, or shrinking the wage gap between those living in the cities and provinces of the Philippines.
So the second part was what? The second choice was?
Or shrinking the wage gap between those living in the cities and those living in the provinces of the Philippines.
Well, the way we put it in a sentence was, our growth should be inclusive, and no one should be left behind. Now, having said that, we are devoting, for instance, an amount equivalent to what will be perceived as the GDP for 2016, an amount of 5% for infrastructure. And why do we need to do that? There are so many opportunities that have never materialized, primarily because of a lack of infrastructure. For instance, early on, we designated the tourism sector as one of the low-lying fruits that can lead to massive improvements in the economic standing of our communities. Why is that so? You don't need a lot of education to participate in the tourism industry. But at the same time, shall we say, certain rules and lack of infrastructure made that attainment of more tourists. Can I just add also that every foreign tourist arrival that comes to the Philippines, we equate with the generation of one job. Okay, so from about the 3 million figure when we started, it's about, we think about 6 million at least by this year. Okay, now, to go to, for instance, Boracay, which is a major destination for those who love beaches, you have to traditionally go through NAIA, which is the airport in Manila, take a secondary flight, and in some instances, take a boat ride to get finally to that island, spending about a day or 2 days of your vacation just traveling. So there are now projects, for instance, that the nearest airport has been declared part of our open skies regime, wherein you can have foreign flights directly going to this airport. There is an expansion ongoing so that it becomes more efficient as a tourism destination. You don't have to spend most of your vacation time traveling, but rather getting back to this area. Okay. So it's not a question to our mind right now of shrinking the wage gaps between the countryside and the highly developed urban areas. But I think the initial step has to be, how do we increase the incomes, in the rural side and relieve pressure also on the urban areas? Of course, migrating to the urban areas is not unique to the Philippines and all the pressures of increasing populations. In the National Capital Region, we have something like 2 million people who commute every day. We see that in the nighttime population of 12 million and a daytime population of 14 million. So we'd like to maximize everybody's opportunities, whether in the urban or in the countryside. But we really think also that in certain areas, for instance, the autonomous region of Muslim Mindanao, there is a significant increase in the national outlay directed to them, and we phrased it this way: they need to be boosted up if they are to catch up, for they have been neglected for too long a time. So again, the fiscal space that we have, the more prudent spending, the more logical spending, the results that have been produced enable us to continue what is being done and has been accomplished. As an example, we talked about the technical vocational education on 1 million graduates. On average, the cost to educate them is paid back within a year through taxes of the people who entered the program. And the person will probably work for at least conceivably another 30 years. So giving that person the education now redounds to giving 30 or 31 other people in the course of his working life that same opportunity. So the program becomes self-sustaining and it actually produces a positive effect in a very, very short period of time. Hence, we believe it will be sustainable even after I step down in office. There will be no leader that I can think of who will say that is a useless investment, but in fact will probably try to improve it further. So that was not a joke about people graduating from that program and earning multiples of the salary that I get. In fact, one of them said, please don't mention it in your speech. My family might be targeted by criminal elements. And you look Filipino, even sari-sari store owners are making multiples of my salary within 6 months after graduation. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. President. I actually had an honor of meeting with you 2 years ago when Miriam College had a brief dialogue with you in the Malacanang Palace. My question tonight is, what assurance can you give in terms of jobs and opportunities for Filipino millennials who graduated abroad who wish to go back and serve the motherland?
What guarantees? Well, the only guarantee I can give you is an opportunity that is increasing. The numbers speak for themselves. We are at lowest unemployment figure. Overseas foreign workers, when I started out, was pegged at about 10 million of our countrymen. The number now at the high point is about 9.4 million. They didn't disappear. They went back home, or a lot of them did come back home. Even at the height of the Arab Spring, 2011, we were just starting out, engineers from Libya, and quite a large number of them, actually had jobs already waiting for them by the time they landed in Manila. So can I say that I can guarantee you work personally? I can guarantee you a recommendation letter, probably. But the economy definitely is growing. There are so many opportunities. But of course, it's a marketplace. The needs and the skills, the supply and the demand really have to interact, whether or not you'll get the job. Perhaps I can end in this manner. There are two major firms, and I'm not sure if I can say what these firms are publicly. But the bottom line is, one is a Japanese entity. It's been in the country. It's expanding its facilities, and has actually signed a memorandum of agreement to set up a research and development center for the generation of new products for them. And when they were setting up the research and development facility, they were asking us, can we supply them steadily with engineers in both the masteral and doctoral level? And they talked of a number, and our Department of Science and Technology came up with a database that showed them that we had very, very many of people qualified with those skills. The other entity is American, a major consumer maker, appliance maker. And again, he's just starting up he will be starting up his manufacturing facilities But he did also say that I also want to put up a research and development facility so that we don't just manufacture our current line, but we do set up, excuse me, the ground for further products. So, sorry. Perhaps the best answer is look at the classified ads every Sunday of the Manila Bulletin. No, seriously. The phrase urgently needed for hiring, in, you know, it's like the expression in Tagalog, tataas sa sariling bangko. I don't want to do that. I don't want to praise myself, but I think that's a serious suggestion. Look at it and see how many people are needed for not very menial jobs, but very heavy jobs. And the demand is, again, normally says, very urgent, immediate, etc., as an indicator of opportunities for you.
Where's the microphone?
Over here.
Go ahead. Sorry, you're not recognized. No, ma'am, this is not the forum for this, please. This is not the forum for this, please. Please ask your question, sir. Excuse me, ma'am.
Good evening.
Excuse me, ma'am, this is not the forum for this.
Good evening, Mr. President. Yeah. Good evening, Mr. President. We'd like to know if you had conversations on the Filipino World War II veterans issue. As you know, we have few remaining of our heroes, both in the Philippines and here. In your conversations with President Obama, was the issue raised about their unresolved claims and his unimplemented executive order, which he signed last July, about their sons and daughters joining them here in the United States?
We didn't have discussions of this in Sunnyvale. There were, I think, previous pronouncements. I'll have to refer to our ambassador to update me or to remind me of the topics that were done there. Perhaps we can give you the answer in a little while. I'm sorry, I don't recall this data right offhand.
Magandang gabi po, Mr. President. Ako po si Giancarlo Arquisola Ibanez from University Prep Value High School. My question is, what influenced the switch from our compulsory educational system consistent of 10 years to the K through 12 system? And how has the transition influenced your view on education?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Okay. What influenced the switch from our compulsory educational
What
system
influenced it?
consistent of 10 years to the K through 12 system? And how has the transition influenced your view on education?
Okay. How old are you, John, if I may ask? 14. Have you ever had the period when you said you had so much time for all your studies, you had so much free time? No? It was always, you have that feeling that, oh, my teachers are so demanding, they want me to devote my entire life, and including my sleeping life, to tackling the matters that they have. Bottom line is this. Early on, we were told that there are only 3 countries that had a basic education program left in the world. Philippines and 2 countries, I understand, in Africa. Okay. The bottom line is you want an education system that empowers the student to the fullest extent capable. So all the other countries who had the 12-year basic education program had an additional 2 years to get all of this knowledge within their students. Filipino students had to compress all of that in the 10-year span. So I'm sure you've gone through cramming at some point in time where you tried to put in everything in a short period of time. And when you really studied with some amount of leisure, and you would say that where you had more time, you managed to imbibe the lessons more. And that's the basic premise of the K-12 program. Give them enough time so that we can reasonably expect that they will be as prepared as any other person that they will compete with in the marketplace. Okay. That's part of it. Now, the DepEd tells us classroom buildings. By 2013, our initial assessment of the lack of classrooms, about 66,800, was accomplished already by 2013. That was the backlog that we inherited. By the time we finish, by June 30, we will have produced over 180,000 classrooms. So in one cabinet meeting, I asked Brother Armen Luistro, who's a Christian brother, who's head of the education department, why did he build 3 times what we were supposed to need? Then he explained, sir, we also had to repair those that were damaged by the various typhoons. We had to replace the 30 and 40-year-old structures that were barely, if at all, that were compliant for the building code that no longer exists. No, it's a new building code. You had to prepare also for the 2 years more of education. So again, whereas government was able to produce only 8,000 classrooms a year by the budget, through various means, the budget, private-public partnership programs, donations, etc. By the time we finish, we will have over 180,000 new classrooms. And the attendant seats, books, teachers, other facilities to afford our students the maximum opportunity to improve and develop themselves. That's the main rationale for the K-12 program.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. One over here, please.
Okay. Good evening, President Aquino. My name is Alan Benitez from Vaughan High School, and I'd like to acknowledge what you've done for gender equality in your country, and I'd like to know what you would say to your successor in order to ensure that he or she would continue your path on gender equality in your country.
I don't think I have to remind my successor what to do, you know. I think the biggest, in all honesty, when my mother became the first female president of our country, that really was the major boost in gender equality and gender sensitivity. We are actually, at times, joking with other people who were with us marching in the streets for equality. We said, human rights are universal, right? And they said, of course. Now we have so many laws enacted with regards to violence against women. They said, that's right. It's being enforced to a large degree. There are still imperfections, but it is being done to a large degree throughout our country. You agree? Yes. When it comes time for the reverse of man's emancipation, will you be joining us in the marches? Culturally, the Filipino has difficulty saying that I am henpecked. He knows that he is being abused, but he finds it, how should I put it, impossible to reveal publicly that he is being subjected to that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is perhaps we should, instead of defining it based on sexes, we really should stick to that basic idea that human rights are rights for all and have to be practiced all the time. And that instead of differentiating each other, perhaps we really should be maximizing the observance of everybody's rights. It's just a thought. It's a work in progress. But I do know a couple of individuals who, and let me share that story with you. And I apologize to the person. It so happens that these 2 individuals are both members of the police force. Their salaries are withdrawn through an ATM machine. The ATM machine, well, the cards are in the possession of the wife, who is also in possession of all the PIN numbers. And so the day they were issued their ATM cards, they would proceed. This is a true story. You might think I'm making it up, but it is a true story. And so, and I hope our media doesn't make this the central story when you report back home. But anyway, the wife withdrew first the husband's salary, gave the cash to the husband, and said, take hold of this. The husband did. Withdraw 1,000 pesos from it, got 1,000. Then the wife said, give me the rest. We have to have some things fixed in our house. Okay, so the guy was left with 1,000 pesos for 15 days. That was his allowance. Okay. It so happened that around that point in time, it was also the time that they were being given their bonuses, which we call the productivity enhancement incentive. So they both went to the bank again, to the ATM machine, withdrew the entire salary, proceeded to give the entire amount, his salary, to the husband, and told the husband the same thing. you can also withdraw 1,000 from that and give me the rest. We have to pay some fees for the children, et cetera, and buy milk, et cetera. Okay. And so I asked the guy, he got, quite a small, it wasn't 10% of what he made, and that was all right with you. And he just smiled at me. So I said, well, perhaps your wife is the more responsible partner. But yeah, he actually doesn't, he was a bit laughing and a bit smiling when he was telling me about this. He wasn't complaining. Yeah, something to the effect that this is the natural order of things. Now, in the Philippines, okay, I think those who've been back home would say that the most, shall we say, effective members of the cabinet were all women. The most feared. The Secretary of Justice is now a candidate for senator. The head of the equivalent of the IRS, the BIR, was also a woman. And is still a woman. The ombudsman, the person that every government official would not want to be brought before, is also a woman. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is also a woman, and who will be Chief Justice for something like 18 years total. So when we talk about empowering women, I think they're very, very empowered. And hopefully, in my next role, I will not be an activist for men's rights. So perhaps it is best to keep reminding everybody that rights are, again, universal, and they should be observed for all. Okay. So I don't think my successor will even attempt to wind the clock back.
Mr. President, at the risk of wearing out your voice, there's one final question I'd like to ask you. Tell us, if you would, what was the tenor of the discussions in the Sunnyland Summit with the other ASEAN leaders, with President Obama, and what going forward you hope to come out of that, please?
Yes. Okay. My assistant is a very good provider. And I assume he hides his salary very well because he hid this particular document. Can I just there are quite a number, 17 points in the joint statement. But the ones that
Give us some highlights.
that resonate most with me, can I just read them verbatim? No? Firm adherence to a rules-based regional and international order that upholds and protects the rights and privileges of all states. A shared commitment to a peaceful resolution of disputes, including full respect for legal and diplomatic processes, without resorting to the threat or use of force, in accordance with the universally recognized principles of international law and the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Shared commitment to maintain peace, security, and stability in the region, ensuring maritime security and safety, including the rights of freedom of navigation and overflight and other lawful uses of the sea, and unimpeded lawful maritime commerce as described in the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, as well as non-militarization and self-restraint in the conduct of activities. Point 14 talks about shared commitment to strengthen people-to-people connectivity through programs that engage ASEAN and American citizens, particularly young people, and that promote opportunities for all our peoples, particularly the most vulnerable, to fulfill the vision of a single ASEAN community. And there are so many more, but these were the ones that really resonated with me.
So it sounds like you have a good message to bring home.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all for coming, and thank you so much to the President of the Philippines.